To breathe into one's balls is a quote popularized by one of my mentors, Elliot Hulse, a mentor to myself, perhaps a lot of you men watching as well. But it wasn't until very recently that I truly understood the gravity of what Elliot was trying to say in his videos. Testicle breathing is a curious phrase, but it was derived from some of the Eastern traditions and has been a staple in some of the mystical and yogic practices that you see popularized in some of the West today. But perhaps one of the more lesser known ways of converting and transmuting one's sexual energy to mitigate some of the problems some men are having with an excess buildup of energy in their lower nature, I suppose you could say, and to mitigate the tension in things like blue balls as well. It is used to keep the brain strong, robust, and the intellect sharp by a healthy movement instead of a stagnation of this energy, which most men find oftentimes too burdensome. Now, before I understand we're very deep in esoteric waters here, but before we all run away with ourselves, you have to understand that this is predicated on the scientific understanding of the craniosacral pump that we all have inside the human body. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to maybe this side or this side put a kind of diagram to show up the craniosacral pump. So essentially, your whole nervous system is bathed in cerebrospinal fluid. The movement of this fluid heavily influences the function of your nervous system. Okay, it's like a conducer. It is interesting to note here that the quality of this fluid is dependent on basic lifestyle factors. So you've got what you're eating, what you're drinking, if you're exercising, if you're smoking, but also sexual activity, as the CSF fluid is also found in semen. So what happens is you've got sutras kind of along the cranium and along the vertebrae and the sacrum, which kind of flex and contract, which flushes and squeezes the brain by pushing or pumping the CSF fluid back up towards the brain. So the theory is that this fluid is very, very rich in minerals and nutrients and electrolytes that are very, very important for the function of your nervous system, for your memory, for your cognitive powers. Now, starting to wade a little bit deeper into the esoteric water here, it is said that the pressure exerted on the brain through this method, it stimulates the pineal and pituitary gland, which is why this method is so closely related to spirituality, as the pineal gland is said to be the seat of the soul. There's some other practices that may be floated around this particular area, things like Kundalini, of course, and various other meditative practices that have an influence on the function of the pineal gland. What I wanted to do is read an excerpt of Joseph Dispenza's book, Becoming Supernatural, which actually goes through this practice. As again, Joseph Dispenza is a doctor in neurobiology, I believe. Apologies if I got that wrong. Not like he's watching, but maybe he will be watching. That better conveys the point I'm trying to make here. So when we inhale through our nose and at the same time squeeze our intrinsic muscles, we accelerate the cerebral spinal fluid into the brain. As we follow the movement of this energy to the top of our head, then hold our breath and squeeze, we are increasing tracheal pressure. I believe this is the same kind of pressure that is exerted in the cranium, intratracheal. So the increased pressure moves the CSF fluid from the fourth ventricle into a small canal into the third ventricle, and at the same time the fluid traveling around the cerebellum, which compresses the crystals of the pineal gland. So your pineal gland looks like a pine cone, and it's got some of these crystals around the kind of circumference of the gland. And when it comes to compression, it releases certain chemicals. So it's actually a contraction of your brain against the gland. So the mechanical stress that is applied and produces an electric charge in the pineal gland creates a piezoelectrical effect. So your brain is like a transmitter, and it's off for 99% of people. And you can coin this the third eye. There are some it's synonymous with this idea. But the idea is that most of the time this transmitter is off, there's no signal being received from some of the information that is going around the universe. But this meditation, the squeezing of this gland and those crystals, activates it. And this is where you start to get into the realm of the esoteric, of the things like, I don't want to say telekinesis because I'm not quite there yet, but certainly things like precognition, so knowing things before they can happen. Now, blue balls, I mentioned at the start of this, is a common symptom that many men experience as a consequence of the frequent excitation of their sexual organs. And the abuse this is having over time, and then when you start to come off it, cool off it, and go through a period of abstinence, you've got this excess buildup of that energy, and it starts to hurt. So this technique is used to relieve that pressure and move that sexual energy up through the spine towards the brain, where you can better circulate it. There's something in Taoist culture called the microcosmic orbit, which maybe I'll put another picture of, that better shows the circulation of this energy down into your intestines, which is typically where you hold the most amount of nervous energy. So essentially, by focusing on this area, especially during meditation, well, only during meditation, breathing deeply while contracting the muscles of your pelvic floor, the sacral pump pushes that CSF fluid back up towards the brain, relieving the tension from the pelvic floor area. Now, here's a caveat. This is a very advanced technique. If you have no experience with meditation, this will be very, very challenging for you. I have only just, and I've been meditating for about 3 to 4 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, started to become sensitive to the inner workings of the mechanics of this. This is something that you can literally feel, I might add. This is something whereby when you're contracting those muscles in your pelvic floor, which is the same muscles that you use for elimination and urination, you can feel the pressure of the CSF up the spine into the brain. You could feel the fluid pushing against the brain inwards towards the gland in the middle. It's something very tangible in this way. So you've got all of that pressure squeezing against the pineal gland, and the crystals start to create that electric effect, and that you can feel this humming. The sensation you get is, if you bring your attention to your tongue, the gland is sat a little bit up and back to the roof of your mouth. So it's kind of in the center of your head. So you can feel this area. If you bring your attention to this area, so the roof of your mouth and then back a couple of centimeters, 3 or 4 centimeters, you will feel a humming and a vibration in this kind of area. So you feel the vibration, and the rationality behind the chanting actually comes from the same thing, is that the chanting, you hear the eternal Om in meditation, is to stimulate the vibration of that gland, because that's what happens when it's activating. It's vibrating at a certain frequency. So what I'm going to do, I kind of created a step-by-step list on how you can do this meditation to make it very, very simple. Okay? So, step 1. When inhaling, flex your perineum, so the muscles that you're using for elimination or urination. Hold your breath for 5 to 15 seconds before you release it. So you inhale and you squeeze, and you push up. When inhaling, flex the perineum, then activate the core muscles. And this means slightly pulling your belly button towards your spine, the same way you would activate your core before each exercise at the gym. So this is like a belly breathe. So you're bringing your belly button towards your spine. It's almost like you're pushing all the organs in against the spine to push the fluid up. Okay. Step 3, when inhaling, flex the perineum, activate the core, then activate the upper abdominals. This isn't a really straining contraction, but you're just being mindful of the centers here, and these correlate to the chakras. Step 4, when you've inhaled and chronologically flexed each muscle as you're going up, visualize the CSF fluid pushing its way up the spine, through the heart, into the throat, and up towards the center of your head, which is that area again located upper mouth and then just a bit back, right? It really helps to visualize the fluid moving up the spine, which will help with the movement. Always hold each breath for roughly 10 seconds when you've got that contraction, and bring your attention again to this area. With everything, well, wading so deep in the esoteric and the spiritual here. So with everything, I really do encourage a 30-day period, okay? This is advanced. And there are some times where I sit down and I don't get it, right? There's something off. It's like, you ever been to the gym and you've been away from the gym for a while and you're lifting the weights and there's something weird. You just don't have that connection with it. So you have to be very sensitive. I would recommend keeping a consistent place, a consistent time whereby you do this. But like everything, gentlemen, these are just theories. Take what is valuable, discard which is not, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Take care.